I'm here today here with the director and writer of new short film I Am the Prize, which will be screening at Frameline and Raindance Film Festival, both happening this June. They star Russell Tovey, who will be recognised, of course, from stuff like Gavin and Stacey and Doctor Who, War Between the Land and the Sea. So, first of all, how's it been receiving so many offers towards film festivals around this short film of yours?
Yeah, it's been good. We're just kind of getting started now. We had a kind of private screening before kind of going ahead for festivals, but we finished it in around April, because we had work in progress that we were just kind of shopping around to festivals. So now it's starting to pick up and we'll be playing in June, we'll be playing this month, more so next week, and then into kind of July and August, and then we'll kind of see from there, how many places. We know we're playing until August. So, hopefully that trajectory still continues and we still have screenings coming up, which I'm sure we will. So I'm excited to see the reaction kind of with festival audiences.
Hmm. So your film covers a lot of very current topics, toxic masculinity and the manosphere. Of course, we're
Hmm.
undergoing a lot of investigation of that. We had the Louis Theroux documentary earlier this year, which was a big hit on Netflix. It's a very commonly discussed topic, but what struck me about the film is the angle you chose, because you do get the sense that Anthony, our main character, played by Tovey, is complicated to say the least. Like he's obviously
Hmm.
reprehensible, but he's also got some layers that you would give him a second look and you would like to get to know him a bit more. So you wouldn't want to write him off completely. So first and foremost, what did you feel you had to offer in this conversation that hadn't already been said?
Well, I think the only thing that, I mean, this character's been around for a long time, and I wrote Anthony's character is within a larger story that I wrote in a program called the BBC Writers' Room, which is a program where you write a script with the BBC over like a year and a half, a pilot episode for a TV show. Him being one of several characters that intersect within this larger story. That was also a feature, and then I'd rewritten it into a pilot because I got into the program. Now I've gone back and I've rewritten the feature to kind of make it more palatable length and kind of work on a tighter level. So Anthony's character, what was going on at the time, he came from the kind of onset of all of this. This was like the Jordan Petersons. Andrew Tate was just about coming up, and then all these other people have kind of come along the way now as this third generation, right, of these kind of influences. But it started there, so that must have been in 2020 or 2021 was when I wrote the original kind of screenplay, the larger story, and obviously that's now changed over time because all these people have been coming up and you want to make sure that it's current and up to date with what's going on right now as well. So it's been in gestation for a while and it's that character's constantly developed, but we've never really seen the influences. We've only seen the people that are influenced and are acting upon it. I mean, the best example is with adolescents. I guess this and the Louis Theroux thing is coming out at the same time, so it looks like we're all kind of working on these things at the same time. And I think we're now at the stage where we're now seeing that we've seen the effects it has on the young men that are acting upon this influence or this negative influence that's been kind of feeding into them. Now we're seeing the kind of root cause of the issue of who are these people and why are they doing this and what has led them to become these people.
Hmm. And that feeds in very well into my second question about Anthony as a character. What part of him was most surprising to you, and how did you develop this character?
So he's kind of created out of me graduating around 2020. I'm seeing these kinds of guys pop up. So first it was the Jordan Peterson type guys, then it was the Andrew Tates, and then a bunch of those kind of popping up. But really, initially, it was fairly niche and it was growing. You'd had friends recommend these people saying, "Oh, these guys are really cool and really interesting. They have interesting things to say. You should check it out." Then once you start looking into it, you realize, "Oh, this is a lot more twisted than I thought it would be, and a lot more morally bankrupt." The more and more you look into it, like their ideologies are insane. So it started there and it just developed over time when you're getting more and more information. But historically, if you just look at the archetype of a con man, there is a snake oil salesmanship among all of them. And you're really looking at the archetype of a con man, because they can start off as snake oil salesman, then they can become cult leaders, and now they're these like toxic social media influencers. It doesn't really change, they just have a new skin that kind of fits the environment that they're already in. So, I mean, we were talking about, I think at the time, I mean, at least what I was thinking about was people like Oron Hubbard and people like Roy Cohn. I think he's a kind of combination of the two of them, as well as all these influences that we're aware of at the time. But I was really drawing from those two as individuals that I found very interesting. And I think they have very similar sensibilities and viewpoints on their overall ideologies and how they choose to affirm or deny certain things in order to fit their own framework and in order to maximize their own success. Both of those guys in history have done that, and they are to an extent both con men. So I think that the archetype of the con man was the thing that I was the most interested in.
Hmm. What was it like working with Russell Tovey on this project? Like, he's an actor I've seen in a lot of stuff when I was young, and I'm sure, as I said before, a lot of people recognize him from Doctor Who, Gavin and Stacey. What was it like collaborating with him on such a stark and very serious subject?
Well, my introduction to Russell was really, I mean, I knew him when I was a kid because I saw like Kim and Her and I saw Being Human and I enjoyed them as a kid. But my introduction really to him as an actor that I really liked was when I saw him do Angels in America and he did a film called The Pass around 2017. You know, and also I think Angels in America happened around that time. So it's when I saw those two roles and he's playing similar characters. They're playing characters that are sexually confused or kind of dealing with an identity crisis with this due to the sexuality. And obviously, Roy Cohn being as a real life person, such an interesting character and an influence on Anthony's character. You know, Russell plays Joe Pitt, who in Angels in America, who's a kind of the apprentice or the mentee of the Roy Cohn character. So it just felt like it would be a natural step for Russell to be taking on this character now that he's at a certain age and a certain point in his career. You know, so I think it was something that it was a considered thought that I thought would be great to have him because it kind of just fits the trajectory of those characters that he was playing during this time. And he's come up recently with Playing Clothes, which is brilliant as well, where you know he's playing again a closeted priest. So I mean, he kind of understands these characters, but he spent so much time with them that we didn't even need to rehearse or anything. We had an initial conversation. He was in, and then we went through maybe some revisions on the script here and there, but they were fairly minor. And once we got to the day of shooting, you know, he kind of already knew the character, he figured it out, and I kind of just left him alone to do the work before that. So, yeah, honestly, just ideal, just the ideal person to be working with because I just had a feeling he would just completely get it and understand the character.
Yeah, that's great. That's really, really fascinating to see that side of him as well. Because he's, as you said, he's very committed to his characters. Talk us through the opening prologue because it's an eye opener. That is the concept and the execution of filming that scene, which, for those who don't know, it's like essentially a one shot, which very gradually screws in on Anthony as he addresses his new audience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The construction of that really is because you need to believe who he is, and you need to believe that this is the guy who he says he is. Like even as a film, we need to believe this. We can't just show a snippet of what he does and then show everything after that, whether it just be the repercussions or the aftermath. You need to have a full grasp of how easy able to garner that attention and validation from all those people. Because at the end of the day, there is a confidence and there is a magnetism. So how can you show that they can have that influence on all those people? So by doing so, you have to have an unbroken take. And it slowly pulls in only because he's in control in that moment. He's pulling you in. He's reeling you into to his words. But if you really, you know, all this kind of confidence and posturing is enough to convince you for a moment. But if you actually sat there and you listen, a lot of it is bullshit. None of it actually makes sense. And this is why I talk about Aaron Hubbard, especially. They create a pseudoscience framework, but because it's so convoluted, you can't help but try to. And because he's so convinced and confident in what he's saying, you can't help but lean in at the same time. I mean, this is what con men do. This is kind of how they operate. They know something you don't, they will rule you in by creating this framework or this guide where you have to, you know, you might not be able to understand it straight away, so that's why you have to lean in. But if you actually spend time unpacking it yourself, it's just a lot of bullshit. It doesn't actually make any sense. But that's what he's doing on a daily basis, and he knows he can prey on these guys as much as possible and as long as possible, as long as he's not called out on it, because he keeps everyone within their own echo chamber. All these guys are they're in their own little echo chamber, aren't they? They're not really expanding these ideologies beyond their internal little world that they've concocted for themselves. So that was kind of the intention of it, that we need to believe this character is, we need to understand who he is, and by being able to believe him, we need to see him at work, and we need to see how does he actually have the influence that we're saying that he does. So in that sense, that was the kind of intention of that. And I think, actually, I haven't said this before, but I think a big influence on that character was I don't know if you've ever seen Patton, the George C. Scott film,
Yes.
where he plays
Yes.
General Patton. That opening speech of Patton was exactly what was in my brain when I was thinking, this is how I need to convince the audience of who he is. General Patton, not the greatest guy, obviously, quite, I mean, a controversial figure. But that opening speech, you believe who he is, you understand who he is, you understand his ideology, you understand where he's coming from. And that sets a precedent for the rest of the film. However, in this case, it's a complete subversion, into the next scene.
Mm.
So you're kind of playing on those traditional ideas because he's almost doing like a war speech to, his whole group of incels that are there ready to listen to him and take notes. So a lot of those factors kind of came into it
Mm.
at the time.
And great reference, by the way, to Patton. Yes, I was thinking about like, what does this remind me of? And I was like, oh yes. So, as it's a short film, it obviously somewhat requires demand that you make, changes and you make edits in terms of the constraints of its short runtime. Did you have to let go of something that was from the initial map out of the film? And
In
did
the
it
in the
ultimately
short
serve the
script,
movie?
yeah.
Yes.
It's just
Did
because
it
we shot
serve
in
the
two
movie?
days. Yeah. We shot it all within 2 days. It was a tight schedule. So I'm just trying to think. Okay, so we did cut off. There was a scene where when he does collapse, there's a scene where he's in the ambulance. Now we were able to get an ambulance truck from what I am aware of from the conversations that I had with the other producers. It was possible, but there was just no time. So we had to cut off the whole ambulance truck. There was a whole scene where after he faints, you cut to him being in an ambulance truck. Now we know we would have really liked to have it because it adds a bit more production value, but we also knew that we just don't have time to throw him in an ambulance truck. Because if I break the film down scene by scene, we shot the second scene, the first scene, first day, first half of the day. Second half of the day is everything in the hospital. Then day two is the opening speech and all the scenes in the hall, and the second half of day two is the interview scene. And so that way we were able to break it up and make it workable within those 2 days, which means you cut tiny things here and there, which again, like I said, so the ambulance scene, there's maybe a scene where he's strolling around the hotel after having the exposure and the interview. But all of that we just had to chop away. But I think it works because it makes the film tighter because all those scenes are just kind of inserts, really. If you think about it, none of it's really necessary overall, and I think the film still has the impact without all of that.
Hmm. If it was a feature film, included that scene, or indeed would there be any more scenes that you would have included that would have improved it?
See, the feature is an ensemble drama, so in the short you see half of Anthony's story. Really, this is half of his story in the feature, because in the feature we're kind of it's a film about a family and Anthony being the kind of estranged brother to one of the other key characters in the film. So it's an ensemble drama, and all these characters are intersecting within this world. So in the short, we are seeing 18 minutes of his story, really, and there's probably another 20 more minutes in addition to that. Really, it's the aftermath of
Yeah,
everything because the short kind of ends with things are about to fall apart. I guess in the feature with his particular story, it's now we're gonna see him get to grips with how he's gonna be able to face himself. Because the point is he's about to lose everything, and it's his acceptance that he is going to lose everything. And how does he navigate that now? That's kind of the second half of his story. So I think with the short, the short did its job. I think in terms of
yeah,
us showing, because it needs to work as its own piece of work. The short needs to work as its own piece of work, and that's why I couldn't extract another character because all the other character stories you couldn't really extract 20 minutes out of them because it just wouldn't make sense. But with Anthony's story, I found a way to extract those 20 minutes and make it feel like its own fully formed
yeah.
film in and of itself, even though it's only going to be under 20 minutes long. So that was the kind of intention of that, of deciding to pick his character, but also because he was just the most topical right now and the most current in terms of what's going on. So I just thought, well, he'd be the best person to delve into because this hasn't really been delved into as much. Now, obviously, the Louis Theroux things come out around the same time, but even then, I think we have another interesting perspective into it.
So speaking of the Louis Theroux documentary, there is an interview scene, of course, with a journalist where Anthony is pretty much put on the ropes as to his backstory and his previous comments that would land pretty much anyone in the controversy
Hmm.
spectrum. And so, how exactly did you navigate that scene? Was it like a prime intention to not make it an attack on this culture?
Um, yeah, you have to. That's the kind of that's the catharsis for everyone, really, isn't it? I mean, that's the moment, and we're all waiting for that because then you're just watching this guy act terribly for half an hour. He needs to have his comeuppance at some point. He needs to be held accountable. So I'm not passing any judgment on the character. I'm just presenting the character as it is. And really, I don't like him. I don't think Russell likes him. I don't think anyone likes the character. But our aim is that you need to understand him. And if we
Hmm.
understand them, then we can hit the issue at its root cause. We don't no longer need to pay attention to these kinds of guys anymore. That's really what you're doing. You're taking away their power. And in order to take away their power, you need a scene like that where they are held accountable. So that scene there is really just his health is not great. He is exhausted. He's obviously been in a situation where he doesn't know if the information she has is going to be detrimental. He just thinks it's going to be another interview. I know all my talking points. I know exactly what she's going to ask me. I've been through this all before. I'm just going to say what I need to say to get through it. And that's until she holds cards that he was not aware of. And then when she plays her cards, he doesn't know how to react because he knows he's about to lose it all. He can't confirm or deny anything. And I think that is the most cathartic scene in the film because, you're trying to understand him, but you just really dislike him and you're just trying to figure out why he is the way he is. But all the decisions that he's made up to this point has made him the bad guy anyway. So he can't get away with it. And for so long, how long can he get away with it for if he's already losing grip over the facade and the kind of barriers that he's formed around himself? It's really just inevitable that it's all going to fall apart.
Yeah. For film student audiences out there, can you name any difficulties that you had shooting this at any point, like in terms of the production and capturing what you wanted with the camera?
I think there were some delays, but the delays were okay. So finding all the extras in time was difficult because you had to find as many extras as possible in the opening scene to fill up the room. And it was pretty good. So we were able to get 50 or 60. So it was like, that's a great. So we could fill up the seminar because you need to believe that. You need that presence. You need those people sat to believe what's going on. But that was fine because we were able to pull that off in the end. I think there was the difficult scenes really was the interview scene, the that scene in particular, only because there were two seagulls on top of the roof that were mating and you could hear them. So the sound wasn't great because the sound has got, the equipment's quite strong, so it could pick up all that sound. There was also a rainstorm going on. So we had to wait for the rainstorm. Every time the rain would stop, then we can go back to shooting. But then you also had to wait for the seagulls to stop, And once the seagulls stop and the rain stops, then we shoot a scene. So it's almost like we had this routine where we had to wait. And then we just about were able to get everything that we needed. But that was the most difficult
Hmm,
period of it. But we were able to kind of pull through in the end.
hmm. That's an unexpected.
Yeah, no, that's just the practicalities of filmmaking, though, isn't it? That's the thing.
Yeah. Well, it's quite the how you follow for two seagulls mating. But
Yeah.
so obviously, we've you've hit Raindance and Frameline festivals. For those who don't know, Frameline is the oldest LGBTQ plus film festival in the world, and also Raindance, largest independent film festival in the UK. So, how do you feel about the film potentially landing in different contexts and to be taken in different ways?
No, I think it's great. I want it to hit as many audiences as possible, and I want to hit as many audiences that will understand it. In terms of the kind of queer themes in it, a lot of it is Anthony's repression and not liking himself and this kind of self-hatred. But that self-hatred was his own choice. He made all those decisions himself to bury all of that within him and to continue the way in which he wanted to live his life because he's getting this validation and this validation that he's getting from all these people is like a drug to him. So he'll keep chasing that validation, even though he's living this very lonely existence. It's this weird dopamine that he kind of gets out of it, having that control and having that sense of power. And so he's willing to bury everything else in order to chase that. And in doing so, he's kind of turned himself into a monster that hates himself. So I think in that context, I can see how the kind of key message in that aspect of this character and his sexuality is the need to be authentic. And I think he buried that. And because he didn't embrace himself and was authentic to himself, he destroyed himself and he lost himself. And I can see how that can resonate, particularly with that audience. But yeah, obviously we're delving into a bunch of different types of things, but I think they're all interconnected in some way. So I'm just really happy to see it reaching a kind of wider audience. I mean, Reynolds is a bit more open to different kinds of things and different themes and different ideas. They're just more of a kind of general film festival championing independent films, and then Frameline are more focused on the LGBT side of things. So I think it's great that the film can dip into all those areas and find an audience.
Hmm. Talking of authenticity, Russell Tovey is gay in real life. So was that important to you? And did it change how you approach the character?
I mean, yeah, I want to cast someone that would understand the character the best.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought, well, Russell has to play that role. Only because I've seen him play these characters as well. I've seen him play Joe
Hmm.
Pitt in Angels in America. I saw him play that character in the past. Those two really stuck out to me. So I just had a feeling that he would be just ideal for the role. Just seeing how he played those characters and how authentically he played them and how raw he plays them. He's a very natural actor. He has that thing about him where it doesn't seem like he's acting, which is
Hmm.
a difficult thing. He's able to stay natural and authentic throughout it, even with his eyes and the little micro expressions that he does. It is that very classical American thing. Like I always think, like a young Mickey Rourke kind of had that naturalism into his acting, or even like actors like when Joe was younger, he had those little natural micro expressions when he was younger. It's a very specific thing that goes in tradition of certain actors. They just kind of have it. There's a
Yeah.
spark to them. They're not trying too hard, but they are able to understand the character. So I think
Hmm.
he's kind of got that. He's got that thing about him, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Mickey Rourke as well, because he's a favorite of mine. And he's like kind of a dream interview, but might not,
He's
probably
he's
won't
he's a
happen.
bit wild now. It's weird how
Yeah,
he's. You know what? Mickey Rourke is a great example of what Anthony is as well,
yeah.
because a lot of these guys they become the act. So if
Mm.
you look at we can talk about the history of Mickey Rourke right now, like very briefly. But if you look at Mickey Rourke and his career, he was going to be this big thing. He was going to be the next Marlon Brando. Everyone loved him,
Yeah.
right? He was the guy. And then he dropped off and he quit acting because he thought acting wasn't masculine enough. So he
Mm.
became a boxer, messed up his face, went through all these different surgeries, and that's why he became a bit more disfigured at the time. But he almost like became he was acting like he was like this bad boy type dude, then kind of disregarded everyone that gave him any kind of respect or adulation. Then he went back to it with the wrestler, which was like his big comeback. But now he's gone back down again into doing all these ridiculous things and being in Big Brother. And what kind of happened? He kind of like it's interesting. His career
Mm.
went in these kinds of cycles where he became so enmeshed in the caricature of who he is that he just
Yeah.
went further and further down the deep end of his own craziness. But he
Mm.
was a brilliant actor though, so you can't really deny that. But yeah, interesting character.
Yeah, it makes me sadder to watch The Wrestler even more, 'cause it's one of my favorite movies, and it crushes me. But it crushes me even more now, seeing that it's very much like him. He's gone back to
Yeah.
just kind of on the shelf again. Um, we had a bit, a tiny bit off topic that was,
Yeah,
but
okay.
also
There's a
obviously
connection. There's definitely a
there is
connection
a
there. There's a
connection. Yeah,
connection in terms of character,
yeah,
and the wrestler was definitely
absolutely. Yeah.
something that was an influence somewhere with with Anthony's character in particular.
Hmm. Um, so for our final question, do you have any advice towards film students, aspiring filmmakers who are hoping to get their short films or feature films out into festivals?
Um, I think you just got to find a way to get things made, and I think you just don't wait really. Or if you
Mm.
are gonna wait, you have to know that it's actually gonna get made by the end of it. I think that's the most important thing. Figure out what you. I mean, my first film was three guys in a room shouting at each other. That's literally what it was, because that's all the money that we could get to make that film. My second film was like a one shot film, which was cool, but that was still two guys in a warehouse.
Mm.
And by then, your first film, you're kind of just still figuring out how to work and how does it all work, and you're understanding it a little bit because you're on the ground there, directing actors and collaborating with all your collaborators and whatnot. The second
Yeah,
film, you have a little bit more confidence, you want to try things out, and that film was very much an experiment. Can I do a one-shot film without cheating and have these two guys in this warehouse and make that work? And I think that worked pretty well. And now I've kind of come into this film where I've kind of gotten all the other stuff out of my system. And now it's about me directing a film where I will take the approach that best serves the story without the need to, it's always good to be experimental and try things out. But at the end of the day, you're trying to serve the larger story. And your best way is to work with all your collaborators. And you're only going to get that confidence by getting through those first few films. So you just got to
Mm,
keep making stuff and you're going to naturally just get better as you go along. I think naturally you get access to more opportunities and a bit more money to work with or a couple more locations to work with or better actors and more interesting actors that will give you the time of day. All those things are important. And I think you only get there if you just keep working and keep trying to get things made.
yeah, excellent advice. And I suppose that second film was also an influence on the one shot prologue that you had with Anthony, if I'm guessing
Yeah,
correctly.
yeah. There is a relation. I do like long takes. That was a 15-minute one shot, but that was on a ZG. So it's like those things that you wear. It's like a steady cam, but it's a bit more fluid. Somewhere between a steady cam and a handheld, right? But the operator's wearing the camera, and so that feels a bit more handheld. But the camera flows around the where it was kind of flowed around the warehouse, and it was about the intersection between the two characters in the warehouse itself. So that was a fun experience. That was a lot more difficult because you're moving around a lot with the operator. In this case, it was we're going to plant the camera here. He's just going to do his monologue, and we're going to hopefully get it. And we did a few takes of that, and we eventually got it, I think, in the last take. So they're both very different, but they're both challenging in their own ways. But I would say that one in the second film was a bit more challenging just because of all the moving parts. And once and it's all in one shot. So if you're 10 minutes in and there's a mistake, you have to start all over again. You know.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Yeah, that was it's been a really interesting dissection of the short film, and really hope that both film festivals go so well for you.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that, Joseph. Thank you for having me.
It's genuinely one of the best short films that I've seen personally.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really
Yeah,
appreciate
and
that.
I've been sent like an array of short films by London Flair PR, and this one stood out
Okay.
really well.
Oh, tell me, what have you seen? What's stuck out to you so far?
There was one about this girl from Mexico, America, who's trying to get over her grief, and she's trying to see these different funerals. And for the life of me, I cannot remember it, and it's gonna
Yeah.
come at me like a kick to the head. But I really loved that one.
And was that a short film?
Yes,
Are they
yes.
all
It was,
shorts? Are they all shorts, Dave? Don't you?
most of them are shorts. Yeah, some of them have been features. There was another one, The Boy with White Skin, which is about a boy in
I
Africa
heard
leaving.
about this. Yeah, yeah. They were. I think I had because my What Men Do for Love was I think it was longlisted for the Oscars last year or this year, I guess. And so I was like hoping like, are we going to hit the shortlist? And I think that was one of the shortlisted films in the
Yeah.
Oscars. So I think I need to see that. I've seen the images, but I've not seen the film yet. And we played at some festivals together, but I never went. So I got to check that one out when it comes out somewhere.
Oh, that's excellent. But thank you. Thank you so much. Hope you have a good rest of your evening.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for doing the Joe.
Thank you
Cheers.
so much.